and they were like, if you decide to stay with us, or stay in this realm for a while, you can wait and you can plan a new life, and it's going to be easier, because based on what you are right now and how much karmic ties you broke in this life of 10 years, your next life is going to be better. And they're like, do you want to wait? And I'm like, no, 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 no. Being impulsive still, I had that impulsiveness of just being like, I no, I still want to go back, because the animals need me, my mom needs me. I'm like, and I'm like, you make a good case.
Hi, Soul Family, and welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Haji, and this is Amazing NDE Stories. Our wonderful guest today is Galadriel Krump. Did I say that right?
You got it.
Yes. Okay. Welcome to the show, Galadriel.
Hi, thank you. Hazi. Now I'm gonna get your name wrong. I'm so sorry.
Haji.
Haji.
Yes.
Ooh, that's fun.
All
I like
right.
it. Hello.
We have fun names. We have fun
Mm,
names. It's going to be
so
a
good.
great
Yeah.
show. Galadriel, I'm already feeling the energy. I'm excited. You have a great story. Jump right in and tell us about your amazing NDE.
Okay, so I grew up in Wisconsin on a small 82-acre farm. Um, and it was the end of December. Is one of those nights when it would get so cold that like school buses wouldn't start. I remember on the news there was a lady talking about how, oh, the school buses won't start, so there won't be any running the next day or something like that. And um, I remember the blizzard was happening and it was really cold out. They were talking about frostbite on the TV. Um, and my parents wanted to wait until after the snowstorm had passed before going outside to gather the animals. I didn't want to wait because I was like, the animals are cold. I'm sure they don't like having the blizzard on them. So I went out, and my family was happy that I was the one that sacrificed myself to go outside because they didn't want to be cold. My dad even was like, maybe they can wait till tomorrow, even. And I didn't like the sound of that because I'm like, who wants to stay out all night in the freezing cold? He was trying to say, oh, they have animal fat, they'd be fine. Silly. But I went out. Nobody was watching me get dressed. So I just put on my yellow jacket. I always wore that. It was my seasonal jacket. It wasn't a winter coat because I had a winter coat, but it was like big puffy, kind of like the Michelin Man style. Put it on and like you're kind of stuck like this, like you can't put your arms. I hated it because you can't do much. And then we had winter gloves that were nice, but I preferred those other ones. Those from like the Dollar Tree, basically, like 50-cent gloves. They were really, but if you had your bare skin exposed to cold air, you would get frostbite, is what I was told. And my parents didn't care to tell me about hypothermia, but they cared to tell me about frostbite because we had plenty of animals that had frostbite and had died from it. So I put on those thin gloves, because I was like, well, I don't want to get frostbite. Um, and I went around. I don't know how long I was outside for, but I would often go into like the stages of hypothermia a lot as a kid, not knowing the dangers of it. I just thought, oh, our bodies do this amazing thing where we get really cold and then we get warm again. I actually didn't know, and it's really embarrassing, but I didn't know about hypothermia until um, I think it was like a couple of years ago. I don't want to say what my age is because I'm like almost 30, but um, maybe I got to just embrace it. Um, but it was like last year. I had always thought that I died from like a bad heart, but with hypothermia, if you're outside in the freezing cold, I learned last year that all the cold blood from your extremities, if you are exposed to freezing cold temperatures, then you go inside where it's warmer. It takes like a couple minutes for all that. Sorry, I forgot to breathe. For for all the blood to just like rush to your heart, and it's so cold that it stops your heart. And I didn't know that. And it gives you like heart attack symptoms, and that's exactly what I had. That's why I thought I had a bad heart. Um, but anyway, so I gathered all the animals, and we had this pig. This is a side note, but we had this pig that my sister got, and it made the cows go crazy. So they no longer stayed in this pack of cows, but they all split up because they're like, this leader cow lost her crap over this pig. We don't think she's fit to lead us anymore. So they had their little best friend groups. And so I had to like wander all over these back 40 looking for all these like little posses of cows. Like I think there's some over here, there's some over there, and lead them all back home. And I remember we're walking back through the snow. I kind of have to put my hand on the back of one of the cow's butts to kind of keep myself steady. And I'm really dizzy, and I like had to pee in the snow a couple times. That's embarrassing to admit, but like, when you gotta go, you gotta go. And I was far away from the house. Now, usually, this is a fun little note. My bladder is what usually saved my life from going into like the severe hypothermia stages. And, thank you, bladder. um, but yeah, no, so I had to go in because nobody else is putting the cows in the barn. So I was like, okay, I have to stay here and do this. Uh, so I get them all in the barn, and my arms stop working. Yeah, I'm like, I can't move because when you get cold, your hands kind of move slowly, and it kind of hurts. But then it got to the point where I couldn't open my hand at all, and so I had noodle arms. And being a kid, I was like, woohoo, I got noodle arms, and like, it didn't hurt if I like grabbed the hay bales and pulled because like we had these like little rectangles and a straw, and it kind of hurt to stick your fingers under there and pull on it because it was really heavy for me. I was 10, so I was like not very strong. Um, but I could see the hay bale like cutting through my skin, but I couldn't feel anything. And I was like, well, this is kind of convenient, that I can get my chores done without having any pain. But I was really, really tired. And I remember laying on the hay bale and just thinking, I could fall asleep right here, but I have to get this food to the cows and then I can go inside. And eventually I got the food down. I got the straw for their beds. My dad and my sister came outside, and I tried talking to them, but I couldn't move my mouth very well. And they thought I was just being sassy. My sister's like, she's slurring her words, and she's not wearing her jacket, and she won't put her jacket on. She doesn't have a winter jacket. She's just tattletaling on me because she could. Um, anything to get the spotlight. That's just the way she was. Um, but yeah, so my dad was like, "What the heck are you doing? Go inside." And he was more aggressive than that. But so I go inside, and I'm stumbling inside, and I keep like kneeling in the on the snow on my trek back to the house because I'm so tired. I don't want to move. I want to lay down on the ground, curl up in a little ball. But I'm like, something inside me is like, you got to go inside, go inside. Everything's gonna be fine. Just go inside. Get inside, taking off my jacket, hanging it up. I tell my mom, I think it was around, um, I'm sorry, for a few seconds, I was actually in the milk house trying to warm up my fingers because other people could take over my chore. So before I started my trek inside the house, I wanted to warm up my fingers. But it started to hurt my heart. And I remember that because I was in the milk house where we had the heater. And I remember I told my dad about that, and he was like, remember to tell your mom about that when you get inside the house. So after I did get inside the house, my mom was cooking, and I was like, Mom, my heart hurts. And I was telling her my symptoms, and she's like, yeah, I guess. Like, she's like, yeah, you don't look too well, I guess. She's like, but maybe you have like a pinched nerve or something. You're too young to have heart attack symptoms. She just was like, it must be something else. You must have done something. And I'm like, good Lord, Mom, like me now, if I have a child, but it is what it is. She's had 8 kids, so she gets down to me. I'm the last one, the youngest of 8. So yeah, I guess she's just like, whatever, you're alive still. But yeah, so I'm crawling up the steps. I kind of have to noodle my way up the steps because at that point, like my whole body is shutting down. I didn't know that, but I just wanted to sleep on the steps. And my mom thought I was being silly. She's like, stop, you can't sleep on the steps. Like, go up the steps. I'll wake you up when food's ready. Um, so no, I finally make it to my bed. I fall asleep, and as fast as I fall asleep, it feels like falling backwards, but it was like an up, like a back and out. And I opened my eyes, or I thought I opened my eyes. That's what it seemed like because everything was black. And then I feel like I'm falling. And, and when you're falling asleep, sometimes you do feel like you're falling. So I didn't think anything of it. And I, it was, so like I said, everything went black and it was like I was opening my eyes, but obviously I didn't have eyes. And everything's so bright. And I felt fantastic. Like I can feel, I can't feel my hands or anything like that, but I fell asleep not feeling my hands. Um, but my heart didn't hurt. I didn't feel like I had to pee anymore. And I'm looking around my room and I can see now the storm's done and I do see the full moon because the sky looks, relatively clear. And I remember the moon just was like emitting this beautiful like light. And it was really, really bright. It's the brightest I've ever seen. And I thought that was really gorgeous. And as a kid, I always looked at the moon, because my dad would always say, I see the moon sees me. I love the moon loves me. So I'm just like, oh, the moon loves me. At least someone does, right? Um, and I decided, oh, I'm gonna go see what my mom's cooking. I wasn't hungry, but I was just curious. And I quickly moved down the stairs. And I'm like, wow, that was fast. But I zooped down the stairs and I'm like, wow, that's fast. I thought, maybe this is I've unlocked some fancy way that humans can move and other people are capable of doing the same thing. They're just been too lazy to just do it themselves. And I see my mom cooking and I see like she's got like this like orange light around her body. And again, I'm like, wow, I'm seeing all these things that I've never seen before. This is really cool. And it ignites more curiosity in me and I have more wonder. And I can, I wonder, I hear my mom kind of talking to herself. I hear her kind of mumbling and I wonder, what's she thinking? And I kind of get closer and I can hear her thoughts as if she's saying them out loud to me. And it's very simple. It's cook food, go watch TV, cook food, go watch TV. And I'm like, well, that's kind of boring. Thanks, Mom. And I'm like, I wonder what my sister and my dad are up to. And I quickly move. I know that to get to the barn, I have to go through the kitchen to get to the boot room, go through the boot room, go through the garage kind of area, and then go across the driveway and get to the barn. So I do that, but I do it like super duper fast. It's not instantaneous, but it's seconds. And I'm like, I'm amazing. I'm like the Flash. Like I didn't know what the Flash was at the time, but I just again I thought I had a superpower. And I'm like, how convenient. I can get anywhere I want to go now. And I'm at the barn and I remember I can see my dad milking a cow and I see my sister and I see the animals and all the animals they have a light around them too. And I see it's kind of golden, kind of like my mom's. And then I see my dad and his light around his body is kind of going in and out and as if like it's I don't know like something not good. And I kind of wondered, what's wrong with him. And then I hear his thoughts. And I hear his thoughts. He's thinking about math because he was growing a tumor in the left side of his brain. Nobody knew about. But he was obsessed with math because of that, which is fascinating. Um, and so I'm listening to that, but then at the same time, his thoughts are also thinking about, well, I wish I wasn't so hard on. I wish I didn't lose my cool on my kids. I feel guilty about that. But of course, he never really owned up to that and apologized to his kids until right like literally a year before he died. But I hear that. I wish I wasn't so hard on them. And he was the one he felt bad for yelling at me to go inside when I didn't feel good. And I was standing right behind him, and I'm like, "Oh, Pop, Pop is what I called him." I was like, "Oh, Pop, I love you. It's okay. I'm right here." And like, I'm like, "I don't care. I'm fine." And I gave him a hug, and then he stops what he's doing. He kind of goes back like this, and he like looks to his right, and he goes, "Gelly," and obviously he must have not seen me, but like I was there still, and I was like, oh, and then he went back to what he was doing, and that's kind of normal behavior for him too in our day-to-day life. Like usually he'd be so busy that he wouldn't really pay attention to me, or he'd give me a little bit of attention, like, oh, hi, and then get back to what he was doing. So I didn't think of anything of it. um but then I saw my sister, and I saw kind of the same thing. Her energy was kind of ebbing and flowing, whereas my mom's energy wasn't ebbing and flowing. That's something that I definitely noted, um, because I didn't understand what it was, and I didn't care what my sister thought, so I didn't. I didn't really like her at the time, so I just was like, I'm just gonna look at her. Okay, I don't care, and then I went back outside to look at the moon because I'm like, that moon was gorgeous. I'm gonna go stare at that because often as a kid, I loved to stargaze. I still do, obviously, and because it just is so humbling. And so I go outside, I'm staring at the moon, and then I notice like this light is from the moon is hitting the snow, and the snow is sparkling. It's so friggin' gorgeous, and it's like so many different colors. Um, One of the colors is I actually turned on my plant grow lights. All the plants are outside right now because it's beautiful, but I'm gonna turn. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? Yeah, like that pink light. So that's one of the colors, one of the main colors that I saw bouncing on the snow, along with like red. There's a lot of like white, and it was like bouncing all over, just in and out. It was like how I would explain it to somebody is like if you have like a glitter pen and you like cover like a whole piece of paper and you kind of move the paper like this, and you can see how it bounces all over because all the light reflecting and everything. And I was like, wow, I've seen the snow glitter before, and it's usually just white, but it was more than just white this time. And I got like this close to the snow because I was just like, I want to just observe it. And it was almost as if I became like a particle one with the snow because I was so mesmerized by it. And then I'm like, oh, wait, no, I want to look back at the moon again because, like, I don't know. I was just mesmerized by it. Like I said, I think I said that word a lot. But anyway, I bounce out of being one with the snow, and I spin around and I look back up at the sky because, again, I like stargazing. That's normal for me. And I think it was around the time I had seen Wallace and Gromit, where they're on the moon and they're eating cheese. And I wondered to myself, I wonder what it's like to live on the moon. And I get sucked towards the moon, like I get pulled. It's like at that time that I had that intention of, I wonder what it's like to live on the moon, and that thought paired together, I get pulled. And I'm moving so fast that everything seems to kind of be warping around me, almost like a tunnel like fashion. And it took a little bit longer than when I, moved around on the farm. On the farm, it took seconds. Now, on my way to the moon, it took longer than a few seconds. And I'm like, I mean, I guess that makes sense. I know a lot of NDEers say, like, oh, it's just instantaneous. It's like, I don't know. This took longer than being instantaneous. I remember thinking to myself, where am I going? And then I get there and I'm like, whoa, I'm on the moon. And I was in a crater of all friggin' things. I'm like, why do I have to be in a crater? But I'm in a crater. So I know some people have asked me, hey, did you turn around and look at the earth? And no, I didn't. I didn't look at the earth, but I noticed, the moon, and it's this white light is bouncing off of the moon. And so if I really am on the moon, amazing. If it's a manifestation, amazing too, I guess. But I notice that I'm on the moon. I'm zipping around this crater, observing different like rocks and stuff, and um, I feel like suddenly I'm not alone. And I look to the right, and there's these three giant, mostly white with a little bit of blue beings, and it looks like they're sitting on the crater, like I don't see that they have faces, and I don't see that they have feet, and they look like they have wings coming out of their back, and they don't use these wings. And I wonder, they're trying to appear peaceful to me. They're not trying to scare me. And so that's why they're sitting and they're so far away. But they're humongous because, I mean, their butts are on the top of the crater and their legs are touching the bottom of the crater. And I'm tiny in the bottom of the crater. And I'm like, whoa, that's cool. What are those? And when I have that thought, one of these things gets up and slowly approaches me. And it's like, don't be afraid, you know? And I'm like, oh, what the heck is that? But it seemed, when you can feel that something's off, you know, um, I didn't feel that anything was off. It was emitting this beautiful light. It felt like when you're in the presence of like a really loving person or like your parents. Um, I take it as being a mom now, like, or if you really have a pet and you really love your pet or something, is just this unconditional love. Me as a mom, it's the same love that I feel towards my kids. Like, you can do no wrong. I don't see anything that you do. Even when you are naughty, I don't see you doing anything naughty. I see you being you and I love you. And that's the same kind of love that they had. I was, whoa. Anyway, so they get really close. Or sorry, the one gets really close to me. The other two stay sitting in the back. And this one, it has like a masculine energy, and it's a male's voice. And again, I still can't see a face, like a human face, but I can see that it has like a head feature, and it's humongous. Like, I am maybe at like the knees or like the pelvis area. Like, I don't know if it shrunk in size, but it's still humongous. So I'm standing with this being, and I wonder, who is this? And he goes, I don't remember the exact first thing that he says to me, but it was more so like, what did you think of your life? And at this point, I still don't realize that I'm dead. Hey, what did you think of your life? And I'm like, oh, I mean, it sucks. And I start like venting about how awful I thought it was, and, what a victim am I, and woe is me, and nobody loves me, and I get smacked all the time and kicked, and and my sister hates me. And then it's like, okay, what have you learned from any of those? What have you learned in your life? And that's actually the title of my book, What Have You Learned? Anyway, but you don't need to read my book. You just, because I can tell you it all for free. But what have you learned? And with that, I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to learn lessons. And so I'm like, oh, I mean, I guess, like, I learned this and this and this, and got to be selfless. And it was like, okay, what are you grateful for? Was another question. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm grateful that, I didn't, in my life, there's kids starving in Africa and I'm not starving. And like, I have animals that are my friends, and, I'm not that lonely. And, I'm like, I guess it doesn't really suck that bad. And they're like, do you want to see? And it's like, well, see what? And I, they kind of gesture towards this energy that's flowing, and it kind of looks like a river, but obviously it's not a river. It I don't know, like those sparkles that I kind of talked about earlier. It's kind of like that. It's like a sparkling and it looks like water flowing and it's all going in one direction. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. And at one end, so I'm like standing and I'm kind of like at the middle. And at one end, the far end in front of me, to my right, is a huge boulder and water's flowing on one side around that one boulder, just a tiny little sliver of water going around it. And then it keeps flowing. And then within this river, there are a bunch of little rocks, and there are some bigger rocks and bigger stones and bigger boulders or whatever. And then at the very, very end to my left, there was one big boulder and then two streams going around it. And I'm like, what is that? And he was like, do you want to see? And it was all how the communication is all feeling, and it's less actual talking communication like you and I. Obviously, I mean, you've listened to many of these, so you already know. But it's all feeling and it's all intention. It's all just emotions. And so, I could interpret many of what he said, much of what he said to me in many different ways. What he said, Um, but it was, do you want to see? And, just, are you curious of what this is? And I'm like, yeah, I'm curious of what this is. I think we agreed on that. And I know that I need to reach my hand in and pick up a rock. And so I think that was just more so like a metaphor of like, you need to acknowledge that you need to take action to, you know, see what this is, what it's about. And I pick up the rock, one of the little rocks, and it's one of the memories of my life. And I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. This is my life. And I kind of just suddenly get surrounded by all of these different things that are happening, and it's all my life. And at first, when I first picked it up, I'm like, oh, that's me. And then when some of these very first other memories that start coming that are playing for me is as if I'm watching as third person. And then some of them, it's as if I'm living it as first person. And then some of it, I get to feel how I made an animal feel. And some of it is I get to feel how I made another person feel. And like one of the memories was of a cat that I had. My dad had Dremel, like a Dremel tool or whatever it's called. I don't know. It's like a power tool. There you go. And I didn't put a nail in it or anything. I had no bad. I thought it was like a hair curler. I'm like, I'm gonna curl the cat's hair, and I got it stuck in the cat's hair because it was a long haired. I know it's a long haired cat, and the cat's like this and going, and I feel the pain of the cat and the fear in the cat. And I'm like, oh my God, I traumatized that poor cat. And the cat survived and everything. But that happened. It's one of those first memories that it's like my parents are like, how do you still remember that? You're so old. Like that happened when you were like 2 years old. You're not supposed to form memories yet. And it's because I viewed it in the life review. And another memory that I shouldn't remember because it happened when I was like 1 years old, my dad putting up a cabinet and picking me up and placing me on the top of the shelf and being like, this is what God sees when he looks out the world. And me being like, wow, everyone's so little. I'm so big, like kind of just this joy that I felt. And then I felt the love that my dad had for me, regardless of me not being his blood. Because my mom, it was a really toxic situation. My dad got arrested for child abuse, and my mom met my dad. So I have eight older siblings and then one sibling from my biological dad's side, but I've met my biological dad once and we don't talk anymore. And that's his doing. He doesn't want to talk to me. And that's okay. But the dad that raised me um, has always treated me more rough, but um, he had love for me in that moment, and he still had love for me, regardless of me not being his blood. And I got to feel that, and I was like, wow, he really does care about me. And seeing me happy makes him happy. And that was one of the uh, memories. And of course, there's a bunch of other memories. I don't need to get into them. um, After that, I came out and, I thought I was just the one viewing it. And, I got to see some of the embarrassing things that I did in my life, things that I felt slightly ashamed of. And I was thinking to myself after I came out of that life review, I was thinking to myself, oh, that was bad. I don't really want to, tell this being, what I saw in there. But he was like, what did you think of that? And I was like, it was okay. And I thought to myself, I better not tell him the bad things that I did. I'll only tell him the good things that I did. And then I felt his energy change to like he pulled away a little bit, or maybe I pulled away. I don't know who pulled away, but suddenly there's more distance between us. And it was because I was trying to be like manipulative and like withhold truths. And he was like, don't try to manipulate, like, don't lie to me. It's okay to tell me everything. I made this life for you, or I helped make this life for you. I know, I know. And that's how I felt too. And at that point, he was like, I created your energy, and you and I chose your parents together. And like, he's like, don't hide anything because I know everything. And he was like, I've been watching, I know everything. And I felt so humbled. I felt so small. I felt so scared because I'm like, wait a second, all those embarrassing things that I did. That I like, like, all of this awful, awful stuff. And I'm like, I'm gonna hide. And I like go down like this, and I'm like turning my oops. Okay, you're back. Good. Okay. So I'm like turned my energy down not to look at him anymore because I'm just so embarrassed. Like my energy is like focused on his like where his feet should be, but like he doesn't really have feet. It's just like this. It looks like this energetic robe of just energy going up and down. It's flowing energy is what he is. And I'm looking at like where his feet should be. Obviously, again, like I said, no feet, just energy flowing. And I'm like, wow, I'm in the presence of a really powerful entity, a being that says that it helped make me what? And I'm like afraid. And at that point I said, well then I don't deserve to be in your presence. I'm not worthy. And as soon as I said that, um, this darkness started to kind of pull in like around me of my entire field of vision, and he starts pulling away, like I start getting pulled back is what it looks like and feels like. And I see like it starts to turn into a prick of like white light, and I'm like, uh-oh. And then I start to get a little bit scared, but I'm like, I deserve this. I don't deserve to like be in your presence. And he's watching me do this. And he's like, huh? And he's like, weren't you grateful? Like, what have you learned throughout all those things? And what he saw in those negative things or those embarrassing things that I was embarrassed about, he saw where I could potentially learn something from it and grow from it. And I was like, wait, what? You're not disappointed in me? You don't hate me? You weren't disgusted by me? Like that's like I did like isn't that and so I came back out of curiosity because you go where your thoughts lead you and your intention leads you. And so I'm back in his presence and he's like, "Yeah, no, we don't like I love you. Like there's nothing wrong." And he's like, "So long as you're willing to learn, you know." And we go into, we start to talk about um my family, and he was like, "You've lived other lives." And, and I don't know how we lead into all that, but these are little things that I remember. And I'm like, whoa, I've lived other lives. What? you know, and I see other rivers flowing, and I'm not that curious to look at them, but he kind of is like, well, it's not gonna hurt you to look at some of them, they're not all necessary for you to look at, but you're welcome to if you're curious. And I get to see some of them. Don't really need to go into detail because some people make fun of me for some of them. um, but I just basically what I learned was that, we do reincarnate with soul families. That is definitely a thing. People that we've made karmic ties with, like my dad was my best friend in another life, but I hurt him very badly. And so now he's in this life making me feel awful. So it's just that, that energy that we create, that karmic tie that we create as a bond with this other person. Something that even Angela, you talked with her. I don't know if she mentioned it in hers, but something she and I talked about, she learned in her near-death experience that forgiveness is everything and it helps break karmic ties. That's what I learned in mine as well. Forgiveness is everything. It helps break these karmic ties. I see a lot of my karmic ties get broken in traffic. If I accidentally cut somebody off, I'm like, oh my gosh, oh, I don't know, I feel bad. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, oh, great, I just made karma. And and then I see somebody like almost immediately do it to me, and I'm like, oh, maybe that car behind me finally forgave me, and that's why I got this karma happening. And I'm like, okay, it's not a big deal. I don't care anymore. And from there, I see the same thing happen to that car, and, and I'm like, yep, there's karma playing out like immediately. But karma doesn't always play out immediately for everybody. If it did, we'd realize what was happening. So that's why sometimes it has to bleed into another life if you don't settle karmic ties with things or people in this life. And that's why every time, I got into arguments with people, I would always message them or I'd call them, try to see them in person, be like, I'm so sorry. I'm a big buffoon. And try to make sure that I don't have so much karmic ties in this life. So I really don't want to do it again. But honestly, we're eternal beings, and that's another thing that I learned looking at this river. River, he was like, "This represents your life. This is all of your experiences. This is all of your possibilities of things happening or not happening. They all exist in this river, ready to happen. It's up to you to choose good or bad constantly." And I'm like, oh man, that's a lot of responsibility. But that's what free will is, And even in death, I had free will to choose what I wanted to do. Now, they can only work because there are laws in the universe, and they can only work with what energy I am at any given time. So if I'm choosing bad things, then they only have bad energy to work with. And they basically weave together this river, and they set things in stone. I don't know, they weave reality is what I understood from it, is what I understood that these other two did. And this main one is the one that talks to people, or at least talks to me. And a lot of people don't realize that there's other ones that are helping, but I mean, I saw three, but only two stayed back and only one talked to me. But the other two didn't start interacting with me. They only interacted with the river and only started doing something when I chose for sure that I wanted to go back to my body. And but I knew that they were listening. So yeah, they were like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back to your body, or do you want to stay here, or do you want to create a new life? But in order to create a new life, you have even more decisions that you have to make. Um, what do you want to do? And not I realize now that not everybody has all of those options when they have an experience. Some people, they have to go back to their body because it's just not, it's not doable yet or something. Um, it's it was with my energy that I had at that time. I think it's because I was a child and that I had such like innocent energy, and that I did live a very loving life, regardless of being surrounded by people that weren't very loving. I was very loving because I didn't want to be like them, because I knew, pain hurts and yelling hurts. So I'm not going to do that. And so I had that energy, and they were like, I think that's why I had more options. And and I don't think my body was in too bad of a shambles, so I could go back to it potentially. And I was like, can I go back? And they were like, well, you can go back, but understand that there will be. So I want to go back, and they say, you're going to have a lot of issues if you go back. You're welcome to go back, but you will have issues because, you have your human body, which has its own human body needs. You have a human body, so the human body has a brain, and that brain is going to have some, malfunctions, and it's going to have some trouble. You're going to be traumatized, like you're going to have a really rough life. And there's going to be beings that try to sway you or distract you, just like there were beings that, tried to sway and distract my dad. And that worries me a lot. But I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I understand. And they were like, if you decide to stay with us, or, stay in this realm for a while, you can wait and you can plan a new life, and it's going to be easier. Because based on what you are right now and how much karmic ties you broke in this life of 10 years, your next life is going to be better, and they're like, do you want to wait? And I'm like, no, 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 being impulsive still. I had that impulsiveness of just being like, no, I still want to go back because, the animals need me, my mom needs me, I'm like, and I'm like, you make a good case. And I, of course, was like, well, what's in that next life for me? Like, is that going to be nice? And I could stay there as long as I want, but we are eternal beings, and we don't have to live human lives if we don't want to, is the feeling that I got. I don't have to go back right away. If you work off all your karma, you don't have to go back right away. And you're only coming to this, or I'm only coming to this life because I wanted to experience, because as a spirit, you don't get to experience the feeling of touch. You get to experience emotions, but you don't get to experience such a dense reality like the human body. And so there's a lot. Plus, there's that, how do I explain it? spreading the frequency of love. That is one of the main goals. And even if you're here for a fun, groovy time, you're still spreading the frequency of joy, of love, which is a good frequency to spread. So that's a good point to keep reincarnating, is to do that. But there are many things that stray you from that path, which is awful. But not everything stays lost. And that's something that I learned too, because I was like, well, if I go back, I was really scared. And I'm like, I really don't want to make so many karmic ties. Like, can you guys like control my life and make me not do bad things that I'm not supposed to do? And they're like, no, we can't do that. That's not what we do. We can step in if you absolutely need us, and we're there to, we can send you loving energy. We can send, like ancestors can come and help. Like my daughter's great 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 grandparents came and they stayed with her for a while. I don't know if they're still around or not because I haven't seen them, but I got to see them one night pop up in the bedroom with us. We were sleeping on the bed, and it was like, whoa, why am I seeing two old people in my bedroom? And then I realized they were emitting this beautiful light that was so comforting, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're here because they love her. And I realized what was going on. But yeah, so I'm like, yeah, they're here because, they're helping protect her and guide her and, check in on her. But for me, I was begging these guys, please, I want you to stay in contact with me. And they're like, we can't always promise you that we'll stay in contact with you because it's up to you to decide that you want us to be in contact. We'll always be watching. We'll always be ready to contact you whenever your energy is allowing us to be able to contact you. Which is really frustrating. And but no, true to their word, side note, true to their word, they did stay in contact when I came back to my body. And it was really nice because I could hear his voice still in my head afterwards. And that was really nice. It was like it felt like an inner voice, but it wasn't mine. It sounds like schizophrenia, but I'm not schizophrenic. um, so giving me all these warnings about coming back. So how I get back, these guys, it finally gets decided that I'm heading back to this life and trying to remember everything that happened. The two that were sitting back and they were listening, now they actually get up and they start moving and they start picking up like big boulders and splashing them in the water. And I'm like, what are they doing? And I'm asking this being that's next to me that's been talking to me the whole time, guiding me, being a counselor almost like. And he's like, oh, those are the decisions that we've made here that you want in your life. And some of them are things that have to happen because you chose to go back and because it's karma and because, all that stuff. And so some of it I was like, I'm kind of annoyed and uncomfortable, but it has to happen. There are rules and laws to the energy. Otherwise, the universe would just implode on itself if there were no laws. And we're all governed by them. So, but I was allowed to pick up little rocks and little stones and um, bigger rocks and toss them in there too. And he was like, you can toss those ones over here and over there and over there. And I'm like, okay, I'll help toss things. And so I was doing that. And I remember that I was holding two stones in my hand, and I don't remember exactly what those decisions were. So I'm holding these two stones in my hand, and I don't know what they're for, but I want both of them to happen. I remember the desire that I'm like, can both of these things happen at the same time for me? Please and thank you. And he's like, no, they can't. I'm sorry. And I'm like, but it would be great if they could. And he's like, no, they just can't. And he was like, you can put both of them in, but they have to happen at different times. And I was like, mm. So I was like, fine. And then I chucked one over here and I chucked one. He was like, which one do you want to happen first? You know, I was like, oh, I guess. And I don't remember what those decisions were. I wish I could remember. Maybe it's a good reason why I can't. And every time I have a problem in my life, I'm like, were those the rocks that I was holding? Is that the decision? Is that the decision? I don't know. Um, and I learned from placing these rocks and these tiny little stones that, some decisions we cannot escape, or some things in our lives we cannot escape, and some things we can. And that's in and of itself, I'm sure you've probably got a brilliant questions yourself for that. Um, and I love it when people ask me questions about it. I used to get like so scared and nervous because I'm like, I don't know how it all works. Oh, but I love to theorize about it all now because I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But that was the understanding, is that sometimes we can't escape what has to happen, and sometimes we can. And they work with whatever is possible. I know there's a double slit experiment in time that they recently did, and it kind of hints more at what I experienced when I saw the river, and how all of these possibilities exist at once, and it's just waiting for you to look at it or make a decision, and then it breaks down into, okay, you made a decision, so now this is what's happening. And then it happens again. And it's like, okay, well, you got to make a decision again. Okay, I made a decision. Okay, now it breaks down. But then it branches off again and makes more possibilities, and then it breaks down. More possibilities and breaks down. And everybody's doing that at once. We all have that happening for us. And all together, I don't know if these three work for everybody or if everybody has their own big beings. I don't know. But everybody gets their lives weaved, at least in the human existence. And I got the understanding that these big beings, they can't come and join me and follow me around, but they can always watch me. They can always interact with me. They're not bound by time like we are in this dimension or this realm of reality of human experience, very dense. And they can always, like I said before, they send ancestors, they send other helpers, they send their own energy. But they have to stay where they are because that's where they're needed. That's their job. And they could leave, but that would be not good. They have to watch this. It's their job. And I thought that was really amazing. And when my daughter actually had hers, um, I remember her telling me, and I wrote down everything on the back of the picture that she gave me, but I wrote down, um, they can't come down, but they send their love, or whatever she said. Like they send their magic. That's what she said, because she's 3, right? So she's like, they send the magic from their brains or whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, this sounds very familiar. But I thought that was amazing that she met the same beings that I met. Because I'm like, whoa, no wonder though, because she's my kid, right? And if you choose your parents, it just gives you much more meaning to being a parent now. You're like, whoa, this kid chose me? Why? I'm like, my life sucks. Why are you choosing me? But it's humbling, it's nice. But anywho, um, so we're making all these decisions, and finally it's time for me to go back. And he's just like, you can just step right in right here, into the river. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, and I'll just go back to my body. He's like, yeah, if you have the intention of going back to your body, just go through right here and you're going to go right back to your body. Like I didn't have to step through there. I think maybe I did. I don't know. But I don't know if that was just more so of like a convenience or like just a nice transition. Why not? And so I get into the river and I'm like, okay, I want to go back to my body. I do want to go back to my body. And then I go down really, really fast. And then I'm in my bedroom and I see my body. And this time I recognize my body in the bed. And I'm like, oh, I need to touch like my arm area. I need to touch like my arm chest area. And I need to, I'm sure I could have touched anywhere, but I just was like, I'm just going to touch there. And then I get like pulled into the body, it felt like. Sorry, I'm just like yanking the phone around. Um, and it felt like cold. It felt like splashing into like, have you ever like, I don't know if you've ever done like a polar plunge before, like you just splashing into icy cold water and you're just, oh gosh. And then I felt kind of like almost paralyzed at first as I regained my consciousness, but then I could slowly move my body again. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I feel cold in this body and I start to shiver all of a sudden. And I'm like, I think I need to go downstairs and be warm. And so I do. And then I'm back. And I didn't know what the heck happened. During that entire time, they never said, hey, you died. I didn't know that I died. I just was like, that's some really weird experience. I have no idea what happened. Um, but I know that it was more than just a dream. But that was the only vocabulary that I had at the time. And I told my mom, um, I don't know how long later, but much, much later, we were all driving in the car, and I don't know if it was like February or something, but it was still cold out, and like Angels on the Moon started playing by Thriving Ivory. And I was like, I know the Angels on the Moon. And my mom was like, what? And I was like, well, and I was like, how do I describe this experience? And, like I told you, I asked them, please guide me at all times. And they're like, we can only guide you when you want us to guide you. And I was like, okay, fine. And so I paused and I was like, okay, I don't know how to describe this to them. How do I describe it to them? And I heard, his voice in my head, not everyone's going to understand. You can call it a dream. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, I had a weird dream. And then I went into describing what it was. My parents were like, oh, that sounds an awful like you died. And I was like, what? I was like, maybe. And then my mom being, of religion, of Christianity, she said, well, you couldn't have died. Maybe that really was just a really weird dream because reincarnation doesn't exist. And I'm like, okay. And that's why I remembered, oh, he already told me not everybody's gonna understand. They're not gonna be ready for it. And I'm like, okay, well, at least I got it out. And but my family was like, yeah, that is a really weird dream. And like, my dad believed me. And my sister argued with me and was like, maybe it was just, an astral projection, or it was like sister was like, maybe it was a lucid dream. And she started explaining that she has lucid dreams, and she was like, they're very similar. It's yeah, and I'm like, yeah, but can you read people's thoughts in real time? And she was like, no. And I'm like, did you see your body? And she was like, sometimes I see my body. And I'm like, yeah, but do you need to touch your body to re-enter it during your lucid dream? She's like, no, that's weird. And I'm like, yeah, see, our experiences are different, very similar but different. And there were a lot of differences. And so, and she was like, well, maybe it was an astral projection. And I'm like, I have no idea. Um, so